Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Under the Macroscope, our weekly podcast where Skybound Capital gets the views of its chief strategist, Jabir Sadawala, based in the UK office, on his macro view of the world and factors affecting global markets and economies and how we react to those. The podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, the Google Podcast portal for Android, and also via our website at www.skyboundcapital.com. And we'd invite you to come and join us and subscribe to this weekly podcast, as well as to Jabir's Week in Review, which is released every Monday. Jabir, since we last spoke, there's been a lot of news on vaccine rollout programs across the globe. And this seems to be the single biggest influential factor on global markets and economies at the moment.
Yeah, thank you, Matt. And that is absolutely right. And there's a very simple reason for it. And that is it's the only get out of jail card available to governments right now. If we're going to get out of this mess, this huge spending mess that's led to huge debt, we have to instill confidence and sentiment in the economy again. And the vaccine is the only remedy that's available. What it does by targeting different groups at a time, obviously beginning with the most vulnerable, is to basically instill confidence in people that they can start to reunite and meet up again and go about the makings of a normal lifestyle. If you actually look at, for instance, what's been going on, you'll see that across different nations that have begun this process, it has really picked up quickly. If you take it just from 3rd of January, which is roughly when the numbers began being reported, to where we are today, there's been a substantial uptake in the administration of the vaccine. And this is exactly what we need. To give you a quick example, Israel initially on 3rd of January was vaccinating 12.59 people per every 100. Today, they've already reached just under 22. Now, it's not a doubling, but it's not far off. If you look at the United Kingdom, they started off at 1.39 per 100 people. That was actually on the 27th of December. And today, they've already reached 3.58. So we are at that exponential phase, and this is what they need to do.
And I know that some of the data that you've been analyzing is suggesting that it's possible to have everyone on the planet hypothetically vaccinated by the end of 2021.
That's correct, yeah. Goldman Sachs did an analysis of their own into this, and they looked at, they took into account all the different vaccines that we know of out there and how they could be applied. And for 2021, it's not out of the question. I mean, all 8 billion could actually potentially be vaccinated. But the approach to this being taken by governments, with some minor differences around the edges, is that they want to begin with the most vulnerable. That's really the critical element. I'm sure you've seen the charts of the infection rates, who it gets most, and sadly also the incidence of death amongst those different age groups. And it is the over 60s and the over 70s who are most prone. Then you have those who have medical conditions. And then you have those who are in contact with these same individuals, the care workers, the healthcare workers. So in the UK, it's no surprise that they want to target the first 4 main groups, the over 70s, and then basically over 80s, the care workers, the healthcare workers, who together make up more than 14 million people in the country out of a population of 68 million. That's significant. And they want to achieve that by middle of February. And by early May, they want to have targeted all the over 50-year-olds, and that comes to a population size of nearly 40 million in total, cumulative. So no, it's well underway, and that's generally the approach that's being used.
So positive news on the vaccine rollout strategy, but I guess one of the things we've learned in the last 12 months or so is that any optimism has to be taken with a fairly strong dose of caution. But what does a positive vaccine rollout mean for growth globally in 2021?
Well, if they can meet these targets, the impact is significant, because when you look at all the factors that are in play right now around the world, you know, a positive vaccines distribution path means that people can start to get back to a normal living. So what I mean by that is this: if you look at how we spent much of 2020, it's what I would call the home economy. Okay, basically you're living out of your armchair. You've got your laptop, you know, and you take a break, the kids, whatever, they're playing games on the TV. And it was very clear what benefited. And you can see that in the stocks. But now imagine if you suddenly become Superman, okay? You've had the vaccine and you're able to go out. Then you can start to bolster a second economy. The minute you leave your home, you know, what am I doing? I'm walking to the station. I'm getting on the train. I've got to pay for my tickets. I have a season ticket that I have to buy. Then I go and buy my breakfast. During the day, I'll get my lunch. You can see all the spend starts to pick up. That's what's become so messed up currently right now with all these lockdowns. And so we can now return to some kind of lifestyle like that. I don't think it does away with the things that we've become used to. In fact, I think we've come to really appreciate it. But this enhances, this helps us to get back to what we were also used to before. Plus, you combine with that the government spending packages. So right now, Biden has got his first big test coming up, because he wants to get through a package that's give or take $2 trillion in America. This is helping the underlying states and their local municipalities. He wants to give cash checks to many of the unemployed, and so on and so on. You know, this is putting money back in pockets. So if you can combine that together with a return to a normal economy, suddenly growth starts to get a real boost. We know central banks are going to keep interest rates low. They've stated that categorically. In fact, I don't think they're being negligent. I think they're just saying, we have a bigger problem, guys. We've got to get unemployment down to the levels that it was pre-COVID. That's our priority. And I'm afraid that comes with, with other side effects.
And with positive outlook on growth, what are the implications then for things like yields and the impact on inflation, for example?
Right. Well, I think it starts with yields, and we're already seeing it. So, for instance, the US 10-year, which is essentially the global benchmark of a risk-free rate, has already started its uptick. I thought by the end of last year it would cross 1%. It didn't quite. That was largely because of the clampdown that we had, you know, with the new lockdowns and rising COVID cases. However, at the start of this year, it began its ascent very quickly, but actually, interestingly, on the back of Biden and the US election. And it's hit latest count, about 1.1 to 1.12 very quickly. Now, it might not sound like much, but this defines the longer cost of funding. And when yields start to go up, you have to take into account what impact that might have on the fees that are paid, the costs to bank loans, for instance. Also, yields, the US 10-year has an impact on mortgage rates. So at some point, that's going to play through. This is really what has to be looked at. And I think from here, the key thing is, will there be a continued steepening in that yield curve? Because we know central banks have anchored down front-end rates. They're not going to budge on that. Meanwhile, what the Georgia state election has done for the Senate is to steepen the yield curve, because the longer end has started to go up. And that has implications for those areas that until now have been in the doldrums, such as banking and financials, because it starts to bolster the reflation story. Okay, and Matt, to your point about inflation, this is going to be a very interesting one for the rest of this year. The general consensus started out by saying it's not a problem. And there are still many who are saying exactly that. The issue that I have here is that now quite a few people have started to shift their line of thinking. And so there seems to be a consensus developing around, well, okay, it'll be higher, but and it'll be higher than what central banks have typically targeted, which is give or take 2%. But maybe now we'll have to settle in the 2 to 4% range. Indeed, many central bankers have alluded to this as well. We'll have to see how that goes. But I think if you take the combination of rising growth, greater spending, sentiment returning, then it is quite possible that we could go above even 4%. And this is where the jury's out. And there are some who are actually saying that they think US growth, which is expected to be about just shy of 4% this year, who are saying that it could be considerably more than that, in the order of between 5 and 7%. So if that happens, then it will certainly take its toll on inflation. And that puts us into new uncharted territory.
Well, as always, it's fascinating to get your views on the world. And heading into next week, we've got plenty to look forward to as well. We've got a presidential inauguration in the US and to see the impact that's going to have. And I look forward to talking to you next week as well about some of the impacts of Brexit and perhaps for some of us down in South Africa, where I'm currently located, what the implications might be for Commonwealth members in the wake of Brexit. So plenty to explore on the macro side. As always, Jabir, we look forward to your week in review, which is available for subscription as well. Do go to www.skyboundcapital.com to register for Jabir's week in review. And we look forward to welcoming you to another edition of Under the Macroscope next week.